Thank you for joining me on the show today. This is the Now Talks, a collection of inspiring personal stories and leadership lessons from some of the world's most iconic leaders. It is the weekly podcast for women in leadership, brought to you by Nations of Women. My name is Dr. Tina Alton, and I'm your host for today and the coming weeks. Okay, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to you, wherever you've joined us from today. My name is Tina Alton. For those of you that don't know me, I am the CEO and the president here at Nations of Women, and I'm thrilled and delighted to have with me one of the most inspiring and incredible leaders that I personally have the opportunity to just learn from her, glean from her. And she's one of the first woman who actually spoke into my life all about Nations of Women. I remember very, very clearly. It was July in 2019 in a hotel in Washington, D.C., United States of America. And it was around just after 4 p.m. That day. And, she just, I have no word to really express the birthing process, but I refer to her and think of her as my midwife, that really helped me to understand the seed of what had taken place and also how to walk that process. If you think of a woman who's pregnant, right, you immediately know you're pregnant, you go to a midwife and you get the wisdom and some ideas and helps and tips on, okay, what vitamins can I take? How do I eat? All of those things. It's not like, oh, you have to wait till 9 months time, but right from day one that you have to get that support and input from your midwife. And so I believe that, Arleen has been to me what midwives are to anybody who's going through that process or understands really the work of a midwife. And so I'm just honored and just really humbled that you said yes to, being with us and just sharing with us just pieces of your life as a woman, as a leader, as someone who's close to the nations, and you've led various diverse groups, people or culture or color, all of those things, and just bringing to us that depth of wisdom that we need, particularly for this time. So I'm honored to have with me Arleen Westerhof, Dr. Arleen Westerhof, all the way from the Netherlands in Europe. If you don't know where Europe is, go back to Geography World Map and find where Europe is and find the Netherlands. But you would get the opportunity to read the full bio of Arleen further down. But really, Arleen, just thank you so much for, the gift of your time and the gift of your life lessons to us as women that are going to be able to just glean pieces of your life. But just as an introduction, would you just share with us a little bit about your journey to becoming, a leader, a global iconic leader? Just pieces of your life that, you would be just willing, whatever you want to share with us. We're happy. Thank you so much again.
You're very, very welcome, Tina. And before I even start, I just want to thank you for having me. Actually, for those of you who will be reading the interview or watching the interview later, Tina herself is one of the global iconic leaders. And so, Tina, I just honor you as we get started today. Essentially, for me, I think there are a number of things that characterize my life. Number one, I think I'm more of a global citizen than a citizen of any nation in particular. Born in Jamaica in the West Indies. But when I was very, very young, before I started school, my parents moved to Toronto, Canada. And that's where I grew up. And noticing that actually that's when my journey started, the move to Toronto, Canada. Why? Because then you're kind of on your own. You're separated from a lot of family. And I don't mean that in a negative sense, because we were able to fly back and forward, but certain expectations, certain patterns of behavior that you would usually be exposed to in your family. They weren't there. And so as a result, I was able to develop new patterns of behavior. I've got to say that one of the key moments in my life was the day I met Jesus Christ. That is absolutely a key moment in my life. I still remember it. I was very young, but it was like everything went from gray to technicolor in one shot. And that's also a very, very key moment. Why? Because as I started my journey with God, I started to hear his voice in my heart. And he started to talk to me about the plans he had for me, plans for greatness. But I was a young kid. I was a young Black kid in a Toronto with very, very few Black people. I think most of them were smart enough to not go to the cold regions of Toronto. So that, when I arrived in Toronto, there were so few people with my skin color that when you saw one, you crossed the road to shake their hand and to talk to them, no kidding. And so that also helped too. Why? Because all of, whether it was leaving my family and the expected patterns of behavior, or whether it was not even being able to grow up in a group that looked like me, it forced me to develop uniquely. And I still thank God today for those factors in my life. We don't have a choice about some of them, but I thank God today for some of those factors in my life. One of the things that growing up looking different from everyone else taught me was never to allow what I could achieve to be defined by others. And just to give a small example of that, when we arrived in Canada, I was 5 years old. So just starting kindergarten. And the teacher took one look at me and she didn't know anything about me, but she said, I think she's going to have a difficult time learning. And so she said, we may need to take that into account when she goes to school. What she didn't know is that in Jamaica, you could start school as soon as you were potty trained. And so I'd been in school since 2.5 years old, and it was just, I could read, I could write, I could add and subtract. And so as a result, it was interesting. One of the things that my parents taught me too was we all need somebody to have our backs, and they had my back, and they said, we're not having any of this. And so all through school, every single year, I was valedictorian, the highest marks through elementary school, through secondary school. But it started right then. That was a battle, but it started right then. And it taught me to persevere, Tina. And it didn't make me bitter. It didn't make me feel sorry for myself. One of the things that my parents also taught me, and it's something that I use every day and I communicate to others too, is you can do anything you set to your mind to. And that's absolutely true.
Wow, that's just, I don't have the words for it, but I think it's so, so true and so valid and important, particularly in the time and day that we're in. One of the things I've written down here is not letting what we can achieve be defined by other people. And it brings me to, this thought and idea that by the time, before we're even born, at the point of being created, that we already are created and wired for good works. That is part of our DNA. That's part of our imprint. It doesn't matter the circumstances of your birth, the circumstances of your parents, circumstances of, how you were conceived. None of those matter, because from the moment of creation, of conception, as a seed, you already have the blueprint and the everything it takes to do. You're equipped for good and greater works. I think, if you're listening or if you're reading, that's the first thing you have to remind yourself is that I am equipped and wired for greater works. And you've got here about, that you knew how to do something, you knew how to read, you knew how to write, you have those foundations already there. However, because of the perception of what was being seen on the outside, what was in the inside, the foundation almost was like ignored and misinterpreted, right? So I want us to, drill a little bit deeper on, for us as women, if you think of it, that there's so many things we already have an understanding of, sometimes just by virtue of geography, right? Where we're geographically located requires us women to be the housekeepers, the breadwinners, or the way responsible for, just managing the house. And that alone is a huge foundation. And yet its culture almost makes us think that, well, because you've been home and you're not, wearing a corporate collar, whatever it is, that you haven't got anything to contribute. So I want you to speak into, for the woman who might not necessarily be, in the corporate world, and yet what they've been able to do. Maybe they run the youth club, and therefore they're the person that, the youth look up to. Maybe they're the neighborhood grandmother that, people come to for wisdom. Maybe they're the neighborhood auntie who it's like the teenagers or the young women would come to for help instead of going to the parents. All of these things, I believe, are a huge, valuable assets that we carry as women. And yet we always look on the outside and almost let what somebody else perceive and say to determine and dictate what steps we would take next. So just thinking back to, at age 5, starting school, and they're saying, okay, we're going to take into account those. What should a woman do where somebody has actually spoken verbally to them that, well, because of your past, or because of what I know about you, or because of XYZ, that this and this, how can they even receive that? But how importantly can they dispel that and keep the focus and take the next step that is right in front of them?
Tina, that's an amazing thing. And that's so important in our day and time, whether you're a woman of color or whether, there are other Goliaths that are facing you. I think the first step is to realize for yourself, they don't know what's in you. Don't ever allow yourself to feel like you are a victim. Don't slip into the victim mentality. Each one of us has the power to actually allow ourselves to achieve our highest aims, our highest goals. And what do I mean by that? I spend a lot, my goal in life is to call out the greatness that God has placed in each one of us, the absolute greatness. Tina, you talked about, me being a midwife to you. What was I doing? I was calling out the greatness that God has placed in you. And what is true greatness to everyone listening? True greatness is serving others to help them reach their potential. That's really what it's about. That's true greatness. And so for all of you who are wives, who are moms, who are maybe sitting there and thinking, I don't have a high-powered corporate job, you know what? You can call out the greatness in your children. You can call out the greatness in the youth, for example, that you are in contact with. Those who, for example, for those who are social workers, who are working with women who are in shelters because of disruptive relationships, battered women, the most powerful thing that we can do, and this sounds very, very contradictory, is to call out the greatness in those women and to keep reminding them of specifically their gifts, their talents, Some of us would say even their callings, because I really have seen again and again that as we speak out the callings of God, and whether you believe in God or not, there's something in the human soul that connects when you hear, words that are being spoken out. There's something that resonates when these words apply to you. And it gives you the feeling, yes, this is what I've been created to do. And so I'd say those things. Don't get into a victim mentality. Realize that people look at you from the outside, but they don't know what's in you. And also, too, I spend a lot of time these days telling people, even you don't know the fullness of the potential that is in you. And so those are the things that I would advise. We all know we are not defined by our circumstances. For example, I do a lot of work with prostitutes and women who want to get out of that. Now, nobody wakes up in the morning and decides, I'm going to be a prostitute. It's just there are circumstances, often financial, that drive that choice. But if one of the things I've seen and that I know is true because we've seen the fruit of it, is if I approach those women as victims, if I allow myself to see them as defined by their circumstances, then even when the circumstances change, they'll still be victims. But if I go in there and call forth the greatness, the potential that God has placed in them, then when the circumstances change, they are also able to turn around and help others. And they're also empowered to change their circumstances too. So those are just some of the thoughts on the question that you asked, Tina.
Thank you so much. Well, wow, that is just incredible, and I think I want to go a little bit further down on calling out the greatness in others, and just thinking, I think that as women, we don't even like to say nice things to one another. And sometimes I don't know what it is, but sometimes I think just from my own experience of other people, it's, jealousy, it's envy, it's comparing ourselves to one another, or just thinking, I'm this and I'm not doing. It's just focusing on comparing ourselves to other people. Therefore, I am almost like not able to say, wow, that is amazing. That is incredible. You're very good at doing this. And those words might not necessarily be huge, but it's so important when we think about it as kids, right? And they don't have to be our kids. We see a kid on the street or in the playground, on the bus, wherever it is, and you're so beautiful, and seeing how it just empowers them. And we become adults. We don't do that with one another. So how can I want you to speak into that, and maybe just teach us one or two ways that we can rise above that when we see that somebody is doing something that is good, that is amazing. It doesn't have to be saving the whole world from fire, but we all know when somebody's doing something good, and we know that, we see that, and yet we stop ourselves from acknowledging that to them. And it doesn't have to be going to write a Facebook post, but can you send them a private note? And yet we stop ourselves. Can you help us, maybe one or two practical ways that we can rise above that? I would say rise above that spirit that rises up in us and says no. It stops us from being modeling different, where we are now able to speak into, just acknowledging and calling out the greatness in other people. Because I know you've done that for me time and time and time and time again. And every time you've done that, I have been at my lowest point where only my family would know. And yet, at any connecting point, you're able to just speaking to me, and it just brings this refreshing and this new wave of strength that I can do this, and allows me to step out. And sometimes all it takes is, I see you. That was amazing how you walked up the stairs. That was amazing how you started whatever it is. Just simple things like that can have so much power in bringing somebody's spirit up, bringing something out of, because we just don't ever know what people are going through. So I'm talking a lot, but I'm just going to hand it back to you. Can you teach us how to rise above, how to take authority over that spirit that either allows us to, I think this question is to, that the spirit that makes us compare ourselves to one another. And therefore we sort of, make ourselves the small, and the spirit that stops us from being able to model differently and calling out the greatness in other women.
You know what, Tina, I think the first thing I would say is I actively look for the good. That's something that has just been programmed into me. I actively look for the good. And obviously, when you encourage people, you need to be sincere. It needs to be sincere. It needs to be truthful. But even just looking at someone, and say, hey, that color looks great on you. I notice what it does to people. It makes them stand up a bit straighter. It does something as women to our hearts when we do that. And so that's become second nature to me now. I didn't even have to do that. Maybe it's just I'm programmed that way, but I realize it's just, I actively look for the good. I actively look for something to praise in people. And that really works extremely well. I spent some time teaching high school in between careers. And there was one year that I had a class of 36 kids, a big class, and they were high school age children, 13, 14 years old. But they were the worst class in the school, absolutely. And one day they came in and they looked more downcast than usual, every single teacher, with a problem class. But there was something about this day. And one of the things that we have to our advantage as women is that we're highly intuitive. You could see that they were downcast. And so I looked at them and I just said to them, they were my mentor class. I said, what happened? And they told me that they had a clash with the mathematics teacher. And this woman had said to them, you are the absolute worst class that I have encountered in my 35 years of teaching. Nothing will ever become of any of you. Whoa. And you could just feel that it was a knife. It was like a knife had gone through their hearts. And then one of them looked up at me quite sheepishly. And she said, or it was a young man. And he said, Miss, are we really the worst class that you've ever had? And at that point in time, that was a make or break moment, because I knew that my words would determine, to a certain extent, their future. And so I said to them, I'm going to separate your behavior from who you are as individuals. I said, you're not an easy class. But then I spent the rest of the hour that I had with them just complimenting them on what I know that they could do well, calling out their giftings, calling out their callings. And I just went one by one by one by one. And as I did, you could see them. That was a transformational moment for me too. As I did, you could see them starting to sit up a little bit straighter. You could feel the energy in the room just changing. By the end of that hour, that heaviness had broken and something changed in each one of them. How do I know that? because within a period of 2 months after that day, they went from being the worst class in the school as far as behavior was concerned and performance to the absolute best class in the school. I had teachers coming to me asking me, what did you do with those children? And so as a result, actively looking for the good and speaking it out is really, really key in this. And I'd say the second thing is many of us women have never been affirmed. What did I do that day? I affirmed these young people in their gifts and their callings, but many of us have never been affirmed. And many of us are kind of wanting to run figuratively, but we limp a bit because of lack of affirmation and things that have happened in our past. I would just say to that, you know what? One of the things that changed for me was the day I realized that I'm going to have to get used to giving what I never had. Interesting. Because nothing is going to change until we decide to do that. Be the change you want to see happen. You didn't have affirmation, give affirmation. There's a proverb that says, give and it will be given back to you. Shaken down, pressed together, you're going to get it back. So you want affirmation, give it, and give it freely and give it abundantly. And the last thing I'd say about that too, Tina, is that life does happen. There are hurts, there are traumas, there's abuse sometimes that happens along the way. And I would say, if you haven't already done that, find somebody, a close friend or somebody who's qualified to help you walk through those things. I notice it gets so much easier to do that. Don't wait to start to do these things until you find some help. But if you notice that there's just some trauma that's been there in your background, as women, we tend to ignore our own emotional well-being. Don't. I notice that actually the best cure for old age is emotional healing, seriously. And I've noticed too, my life is more joyful, and I'm actually able to be much more relaxed in who I am. And I'm not threatened when others do well. I actually now can rejoice in that because I've allowed also myself to be healed of some of the things that, just dogged me when I was younger.
Wow, this is really, really good. And I 100% concur with what you said about, the things that are spoken to us and how our spirit can receive that and almost be like the seat in the veil with which we then walk life, with. When I was in primary school, one of my teachers called me a name I can't even repeat on here, but the dictionary meaning is that you're stupid or obnoxious. The meaning of it is extremely unpleasant. So I went home crying and told my grandma that my teacher called me, stupid and extremely unpleasant. And she said, baby, if she knew how special you were, she would not be saying that. Let me tell you, that woman is just jealous. She just wishes she was you. That's exactly what my grandmother told me. My dad went to school and to the teacher, but that day, it could have marked my spirit. It could have marked who I could have become. But my grandmother, always affirmed me and said, Tina, there is so much more in you. There's so much more in you. There's so much you're called for. There's so much you're created for. Don't listen to these people. Don't let them. And it was just those little things that she just helped me through, whether it was a school challenges or my parents, whatever it was. She always would be like, look, just don't give your ears, don't give your mind to it. Don't. Just remember you're special. And just those were my ears, but there was nothing special about me. It's very tiny. Yeah, it's very tiny. But it's like the best things come in tiny packages, I learned. So those little words that we can speak to people. And I love what you said about being intentionally choosing and deciding that I'm going to choose to see the best in other people. I'm going to choose to see others, for who they are, beyond their circumstances, beyond what I know about them, beyond whatever choices they've even made. I'm going to see them for who they are. And through that experience of being intentional, we're then able to speak into, even if it's simple as that color looks very good on you. That's a starting place that you can. And as you're giving what you may not have received, the affirmation you may not have received, like Arleen said, and I believe, the Bible says the same as well, that we have to be willing to, not willing, that what we use our mouth to say has so much power. We can actually kill someone by the things we say, and not necessarily physically. And some people, sadly, may have had things spoken to them that, pushed them to the edge, that it's like, it's too much for them. But really, sometimes we can be deeply hurtful with our words, that you can almost like kill the spirit of that person, the seed of them. And I see women in their 40s, in their 50s, some in their 60s that are still stuck with things that were spoken to them when they were 7, when they were 20. And I'm thinking, you're in your 40s, like 2 decades, 3 decades on, and they're still stuck. And so as you're listening and look in your community, look around you, who around you that perhaps, exhibits those I would say characteristics of wanting to be affirmed, and model that where you speak just simple things. Like Arleen said, be the change that you want to see. If you're listening or reading, be the change that you want to see, model differently, because life happens. But, we can be part of the catalyst that actually begins that healing process, begins that turning around process in that person's life. So thank you so much. I want to switch back to your own life, Arleen, as an amazing global leader. It's almost easy for someone to stand and say, oh, well, but she's a global leader, and she's, this, like, sometimes, oh, she's lucky or what. But I know that leadership is a huge responsibility. Mm-hmm. Any form of leadership comes with such huge responsibilities. It comes with choices, every decision that you've got to make, every choice you've got to make, how, what words you use, because your words have weight, mm-hmm. People word, and that becomes that leads to what choices and decisions they're going to make. So as a leader called to the nations, what would you say? And if you think of a giant, a Goliath that you've had to slay, what would that be as we learn from your life? I really want us to bring the message that it doesn't matter how high you go in your leadership, you're always going to face Goliath. But how do you face those Goliaths?
Yeah, Tina, I'd have to say the biggest Goliath in my life is the fear of failure. That is absolutely the biggest Goliath in my life. And I think everyone listening can identify with that. Yes, the biggest Goliath in my life is the fear of failure. And actually, one of the ways that I cope with that is to take the step anyway. To take the step anyway. You don't become a leader, especially international, from one day to the next. And so I do believe in calling. I do believe in leading. I do believe that if we ask God to help us, one of the Proverbs says, trust in the Lord with all your heart. Do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And so, and just fear of failure, but also fear. That's the biggest Goliath that I've had to face in my life. And so just a number of these things, just going back, because, Yeah, it started from, I grew up in Canada. I was afraid to fly. A plane crashed close to our home. When I was 11, I decided I was not going to fly again because I saw the body bags and the pieces of people in those body bags. It leaves an impression. And yet God called me to go to China, and I had to fly to get there. Literally, friends had to come out of that plane and carry me, under the arms onto the plane because I was crying, like I was frightened. But they didn't allow me to remain in my fear. They carried me onto that plane. They helped me to face my fear. Later, when the Lord opened the doors for me to go to London to do a Postdoctoral Research Fellowship at one of the most prestigious universities for my subject in the world, I had to fly to get there. But by that time, the fear of flying had been broken. But there were new things. I could have chosen to stay with what I knew in Canada. There were opportunities for me there. But I just felt strongly I needed to take new steps into the unknown. And that one step, that singular step, it doesn't look like such a huge step, but that singular step opened the door to me going to the Netherlands and opened the door to international influence. I didn't know it back then. I didn't decide I was going to be an influential leader on an international scale. I was just taking the steps that I saw were pushing me out of my comfort zone. And not because I was heroic, but every time I prayed, the Lord spoke to me and said, take the step. I was being obedient, not heroic. And I took those steps with knees shaking, sometimes literally knees shaking. When I arrived in Amsterdam, I literally heard an inner voice saying to me, you're home. And I had to look at the map to figure out where it was. But by that time, I was out of my comfort zone. And then I married a man who would not allow me to stay in my comfort zone. He kept pushing me out of my comfort zone. These days, risk is just normal. I don't have a comfort zone in the comfortable anymore. My comfort zone is in taking those steps. But that's now 2 or 3 decades of taking steps that push me out of my comfort zone. With regards to international leadership, you and I know each other from several things, but also what I'm doing in the economic sphere. My Ph.D. is in chemistry, and my postdoctoral work was in semi and superconductor technology. Ladies, if you're listening to this, do not be intimidated by this. All I'm trying to say here is, I worked really hard. Determine, ladies, please, to be a woman of excellence in whatever you do. It doesn't matter what it is, do it to the best of your ability. I'm not talking about being perfectionist, but do it to the best of your ability and trust God to do the rest on that. And so that's what I've always done. I'm not the smartest. I'm not the most gifted, but I have tried to take steps of obedience. And so when, he called me into the economic sphere to change economies of nations, that was a big step. And I remember being confronted with the fear of failure because I had to moderate a meeting that I'd organized for CEOs, for academics, and for politicians and ministers in governments. And it's one thing to fail on a small level, but it's another thing to fail on an international scale. That was a new level of fear. And I'm not kidding. My legs were shaking. But what helped? I took the steps anyway. You don't take that kind of step first. What helped me to take that big step was that I'd been used to stepping out of my comfort zone for years before that. And I would say, Tina, our comfort zones can be the biggest enemy to realizing the potential that is in our lives. For those of you who are not religious, I'll say it that way. For those of you who are, I'd say our comfort zones are the absolute enemy of realizing the potential that God has placed in our lives. And I also say very, very, very much, do not allow those who will encourage you to settle in your comfort zone to come into your inner circle of friends. When Dick, my husband, and I married, we made a promise to each other that we would push, pull, carry, or drag each other if we needed to be the best that we could be. And he has kept his promise to me, and I have tried to keep my promise to him. And as we look back today, after 27 and a half years of marriage, we see that neither of us could have gotten where we are if we hadn't had each other to encourage and to not allow ourselves to sink back into our comfort zone. So many people talk about things needing to be a safe space. I know what they mean, but on the other hand, safety doesn't mean that you won't be challenged. Let's just put it like that. Run with women, ladies, who will challenge you, who will believe in you, who will pick you up when you fall down, but not allow you to stay there.
Wow, that is profound. Absolutely profound. Just to go back is that, as if you're a believer, I mean, just going back a bit, as leaders, fear is always going to, you're going to be confronted with things that perhaps are new, or, you have to spearhead, you have to, like, there's always going to be challenges everywhere. And, challenges sometimes can come, the baggage or the luggage the challenges come with sometimes is fear. So if you're a believer and you're feeling afraid for what, the next step you're going to take, whatever it is, then ask God for help. If you're not a believer, find, those people that see who you are. They understand the heart of who you are, and allow them to challenge you, allow them to push you, allow them to drag, kick, or, whatever it is that you require. But no matter what, under no circumstance, should you remain in your fear. And your comfort zone is always going to be your absolute enemy to realizing your biggest potential. That was profound for me. And, safety doesn't mean that you won't be challenged. That's like, wow. I mean, isn't it so true that there's always this running towards, well, I need a safe place. And so we bind with those that are same as that, particularly, if I think for me as a woman of faith, I see it in the law, people who are faith is like, we just want to track with same. But how can you stretch if you're only in the same? So please take it from Arleen, find people and allow them to fulfill the purpose for which they're in your life. That is stretching you, that is challenging you, that is calling you out, that is holding you accountable, that is speaking, life, that's affirming you, empowering, and you equally can't just wish or pray for people like that in your life if you're not going to be one. You have to be also a woman that affirms other women. You also have to be the woman that, pushes other women, stretches other women. You are able to hold other people accountable. You have to be for one another that which you desire and wish for somebody else to be in your life. So I'm really mindful of time, and I want to honor, the gift of the time. But I want us to, if it's okay with you, just go a little bit into, your work in economics. And actually, before that, you said you're not the smartest, but to my 16-year-old, you're the smartest woman she's ever met. I'm still trying to, I know her I just think you need to kind of like rethink that whole. But I'm still trying to convince her. But to my 16-year-old daughter, you're the smartest woman she's ever met. It's like, PhD.
Yeah.
Oh, mama, like she's the smartest ever. So to the 16-year-old, you are. So I'm not gonna stop her from thinking that, but just wanted to, pop that in there for you.
But you know what, Tina, before you go on, it's just when I was working on my PhD, and I had to work really hard, pray really hard, work really hard. I thought the day I got it, that I would know everything, that I would be truly smart. And the day I got it, I realized how little I absolutely knew, in the sense, I knew a lot about one tiny, tiny little area, but I started to see the big picture, and that keeps you humble. To know it's just, you can know a lot, but you're never there'll always be people who know more than you. And that's actually a good thing. It keeps you on your toes.
Thank you. And now you've given me hope. I'm gonna tell my daughter, yes, Arleen might be the smartest woman but you know what? If you are humble, you would know that there is something you can learn from me too.
Amen. Yes, Tina.
Thank you
Absolutely.
for that. I wanted to share with us your work on economics, because I do believe for women as leaders, we have the opportunity to use the influence we have as leaders to make a change.
Yeah.
And there is really a crisis of leadership in our world at the moment. And as John Maxwell defines, leadership is influence, and everything rises and falls on leadership. And so as these, women are reading and listening to your story, I want you to just, bring us home on how we can use our influence maybe in our businesses or the organizations that we're leading. Really just the perspective. I love economics of mutuality and what it stands for, and how it really has everything we require to really change the world, without like decades and decades and decades away. It's like, if I can influence that decision in my company, my company has potential to change and transform a community. That's one community.
Yep, absolutely.
Can you help us to, as much as you can, because there is a lot around economics of mutuality that we probably can't exhaust in this call here, but how can we utilize our businesses, our organizations, our influence as leaders in the business world? How can we use our business for good?
Yeah. You know what, Tina? It all starts with purpose. For everyone watching who's in the business community, and the economics of mutuality, what it is it is a management innovation. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'll keep it short, but I'm going to start with purpose. It's just, why have I been given my business? What problem for people, society, or for the environment is my business supposed to solve? And the economics of mutuality it's not even so much about purpose, the economics of mutuality, but it's about the realization of that purpose. And that is the highest aspiration, I believe, that any individual, that any organization can aspire to. And so the first step, ladies, if you have a business or if you are entrepreneurial, is what problem for somebody else or something else has your business been called to solve? You can't solve everything, but you can solve one thing. And that's where it starts. I think it's important for us to realize that economics is the study of scarce resources. And for the last 50 years, we have been taught, anyone who studied business, anyone who studied marketing, that the sole social responsibility of our businesses is to maximize profit for the shareholders. Many of you listening will have small businesses. So I'm going to talk to the small business owner right now, or the woman who's just starting out, on the journey. I would say the usual starting point on business is, what's the hole in the market that I can step into? But I think we need to back up and say, what is the problem that I've been called to solve? And how can I do that with my business? A simple example is there's a business that I know, and they bake brownies. I'm not going to name the business, but they bake brownies. And they say, we don't hire people to bake brownies. And their brownies are used in Baskin and Robbins. So, they have big clients, ice cream, but they say we bake brownies so that we can hire people. That's their problem that they have been called to solve. And they choose to hire also people who are difficult to hire. They're based in the United States, and they use a policy of open hiring. For those, for example, who have prison records in the US, it's almost impossible to get a job once you get out. That sticks with you for the rest of your life. And so as a result, they have a policy of open hiring, which means they don't ask any questions. They hire those who apply. And what do they find? That the people who come to work for them are so grateful for the opportunity, that they are some of the best workers in the industry. And so that's a simple example. And I would leave it there for now. One of the reasons why, however, I am committed to the economics of mutuality is that business is going to have to get in the game to help to solve some of the problems of society that we're facing right now. These problems are too great for just government alone. And what the economics of mutuality does better than any other method that I have seen, and I've seen a lot, is that it is practical, it is actionable, it produces businesses that outperform those that are just based on profit maximization for the shareholders. Economics of mutuality is not anti-profit, because let's face it, without profit, you have no business. However, I'm all about healthy businesses that actually are able to act as a force for good in reality, to see change come, whether it's in a small community or a larger community, in the sphere that your business influences.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate that. What I've taken out from here is that don't think, what opportunity, if you have a business, or you're just starting a business already, expanding, for example, don't think, what opportunities can my business step in and occupy and take? Think, what problem can my business solve? Use
Tina,
your business.
Sorry to interrupt. Can I just use one more example? I think that'll speak to your ladies too. A friend of mine, she is not a woman of faith, but she lives in the northern part of the Netherlands. She studied business, and then she stayed home for 15 years to have her children. Actually, it was 20 years to have her children and get them to the point where they were out the door, all of them, or able to be independent. And after that, she started to look around, and say, I want to do something. She's married, and she could have stayed home, but she said, I want to do something. I want to do something that's meaningful. And so she just started to look around at her community. And what she noticed when she went to the grocery store weekly was that there were a lot of women, immigrant ladies, who were just kind of hanging around with nothing to do. And she started to talk to them. And, some of them were doctors or dentists. Some of them were school teachers or other things. Or some of them had, they didn't have a profession, but they were new to the nation. They didn't speak the language. And so as a result, their opportunities for employment were almost zero. And that bothered her. And so that was her thing that she wanted to take up. And she thought, what am I good in? Well, obviously she was good in business, but she said, I also love to sew. And so she asked herself, what did she love to do? And so she noticed that with her husband's shirts, like all of us ladies, it's just who are married or have been in relationships, the men's shirts wear out at the collars and at the sleeves first. But the rest of the material is good. So what did she start to do? She started to make boxer shorts out of the shirts that have been worn out. And she started to collect those things. And then she thought, well, you know what? I also want to do something to help these women. And so she managed to get grants. She started first with an NGO, not for profit. And she would take in these women. She would give them a salary with the grants that she got, and she would teach them to sew. But then she started to think, hey, that's for now, but it's not sustainable. So what did she do? She turned it into a business, and that was for profit. And she talked to a local community college, and she got them to agree to work together with her. Each one of the ladies got a language coach from this community college. She managed to hire them for a term of 2 years, and together with the community college, she and the community college provided the ladies with a skill, sewing, but even much more than that, with language skills and with a diploma from a local community college that was recognized by the government. And that has become a major, major businesses. Her clients are ING Bank. Her clients are Philips. Her clients are multinational corporations because they love the story. And so I drove up one day because that also captures my imagination, from old shirts, boxer shorts, but also helping women who actually have no chance to enter the labor market here as they are. And as I was there, having coffee with her, I saw all sorts of immigrant women, and they were sewing. But I also had a chance at coffee break to talk to a 23-year-old young lady from Uganda who had arrived in the Netherlands just 2 years earlier. And she spoke fluent Dutch. She'd just been accepted into a law degree at the university in the north of the Netherlands. But, it's just that business has had so much positive social impact for those ladies. Many of them are Muslim, and this is their chance to contribute to their families' finances. It gives them a place to gather. It gives them skills that they can use when they finish the program to proceed further. And so this lady, the founder of this business, a housewife, who decided to, just take the skills that she had and combine the skills with something she loved to do, which was sew, and to better the lives of others. That is now being reproduced in several major cities across the Netherlands because it works like crazy.
Wow, thank you so much, Arleen. I think that brings home the idea of what economics of mutuality is in a very practical, sense. So don't ever, for me, what I've taken out is don't ever think that my business or my idea or what I see in the community is too small, or, what I see in the community is too big for me to solve. Or don't think your business is too small or your idea is just nothing because of your background or because, XYZ. Always look at how can that idea be developed into something that actually is not seeking to fulfill an opportunity, but it's seeking to solve a problem. It's seeking to understand, it's seeking to solve a problem. A problem is seeking to understand, pieces of society. How can that problem how can, if I solve the problem, how does that change society? How does that change? Again, I've got here environment. So not every business is able to affect the environment, but you can affect the mental and emotional environment. You can affect, the home, if you will, by being a business that solves a meaningful problem within our society. And so think of the purpose and think of problem, not opportunities. I really, really love that.
And I think we're rounding things off anyway right now.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. So Arleen, I could listen to you all day long. I just love listening to you because there's so much I learn every time, I engage with you. And so I want us to think about if there is one thing or maybe two things that I could learn from your life as a leader, as a global, leader called to as a leader that, is operating at national, international level across different cultures, different nations, different continents, however you want to look at it. If there's one or two things I could learn from your life, what would you want me to learn from your life?
I think be your authentic self, but your authentic self is more than you think it is. So aim high and refuse to settle for less. And actually, let's take the step. Take the step. Because if you do that prayerfully, you'll be surprised at the things you see materialize. And even when we think we fail, actually, let's just put it like this. Some of the greatest discoveries have come off of the back of failure. So don't give up. Just don't give up, ladies. Don't give up. And I would almost say, let's just put it like this. I know that the world says don't, believe in yourself. I don't believe in myself. I believe in someone greater than myself. And as I try to make him great by serving people, he opens doors. So maybe I think maybe even just to look at it this way, Tina, it's not even about us. It's about what we can mean for others. And I think that's kind of the lesson that I've learned looking at it. It's not about me. It's about what I can mean for others and how I can lift them up. And as I do that, I'm noticing I get lifted up too, but I don't do it so I can be lifted up. It's just, what can I mean for others? And how can I glorify God through doing that?
Wow, I just love it. It's like the cherry on the icing or the cake for me is what can you mean for others? Because there's so much meaning in others, and how can we become meaningful to others? I find it's in serving others. When we serve others, that is where the meaning of who and what we can be to others come. And personally, in my own life, service has always been the door opener for me. The day I arrived in United, I'd run away from home. The day I arrived in United Kingdom, I was homeless. So it took a friend of a friend of a friend. I went to the grandma, Auntie Rose, and it was like, I will clean, I'll do this. And out of that, shortly into my stay, she calls me. In Africa, they call your full name. It's not a compliment. You're in trouble. It's like, Ernestina. It's like, oh, Lord, you gotta help me. I was like, I need to talk to you. Just like, nobody has served me the way you have, not even my family. And so I would love for you to stay, and those of you that know my story know the rest of it. She put a roof over my head, and that was a catalyst to being able to find my feet and just everything else that followed from there. So until you serve others, I find that who you truly can be for others is almost like hidden. Serving others is the seed that brings the harvest, brings the harvest and brings the glory to God as well. You talked about, others say believe in yourself, and we believe in God as women of faith. And I do believe that every one of us have faith of some sort. When you switch a light on, you have faith that, there's no like electricity to come or the tap. Well, I know there is war and things like that. So those things, but the thing is that we all have faith of some sort. I don't know what your faith is. And I'm not selling you my faith, but whatever it is, I think believing in yourself is almost a recipe for disaster, because we're not of ourselves. There's always I would say a God that is higher than us. A God that knows and carries a greater purpose for us, and so we've got to have that faith that there is God that is higher than me. And so I'm going to choose to have that faith and believe in God. So I thank you so much for the gift of just giving us the honor to just share pieces of, your life and your lessons as a leader. And there's so much that is packed in here. I do hope and pray that as you're listening, as you're reading, that you're actually being able to receive seeds that would be deeply embedded, sown into your heart, sown into your spirit, sown into your being, and that you'd begin to able to, see clearly. Perhaps maybe it's a door of opportunity that's facing you. And Arleen talked about when I work with a prostitute, is that your circumstances should not drive your choices and your decisions. And so I don't know what opportunities facing you or what circumstances you're finding yourself in, but if you're finding yourself in a circumstance that perhaps is going to drive your choices and what you do, then like Arleen said, ask for help. Ask for help, because nobody gets up and decide, I'm going to be a prostitute, I'm going to do this, I'm going to be bad, I'm going to be, it's usually comes out of really challenging, mostly financial challenges. So, and this season, as we begin the year, is a real challenging time, predominantly for a lot, because even when you look at the seasons, in the scheme of seasons of life, it's a time where there's a lot that is, introspecting, going in. Even in the animal kingdom, they're hibernating. In the garden, it's a time where almost like we go in, but it's also the time, a great opportunity to spring back up again, to step back out again, to grow, to be revived, to be refreshed. And so ask for help, put pride aside, put ego aside, put all of those aside, and, step out of your comfort zone, step out of the safety zone and ask for help in a place that would challenge you, a place that would scratch you, kick you, drag you, but will not allow you to stay in, that rut, if you will. So that said, Arleen, thank you again for the gift of your time, and thank you for the word you have been to me, being my midwife, and the who you have been to me. I don't think I'd ever have the words to express who you have been to me. You've been a mentor, you've been a mom, you've been a friend, you've been so many pieces in between there. But one thing I know is that you've always been a consistent sound voice in my life, and that at every time you've spoken into my life has, been a catalyst for my next. So thank you for being that woman to me. And I hope that everybody that's listening, that you would also feel that, as in your spirit, as you're listening to this conversation, that the voice of Arleen would begin to speak into some of these areas in your life. And you'd have Arleen's details. She offers mentoring programs and, training business leaders, all of those things. You find all that information. Please reach out and ask for help. There is so much that is available to you. Arleen said, be your authentic self, but there, like you would not even be able to fully grasp the potential of who you are And we all need that somebody that helps us to catch glimpses of our fullest potential. So we make that available to you. Please connect with Arleen, her organization, ministry, all of those things. And do never, ever, ever give up. Remember that as leaders, you'd always have challenges. There'd always be Goliaths. But as you focus, as you trust, as you believe, as you walk in faith and take this next step and the next step and the next step, you will slay your giants. So that said, thank you again. And until we come your way next time, I hope this has been a huge blessing to you wherever you are.
Blessings.
Thank you. And that's all for this week. You've been listening to Dr. Tina Alton with the Now Talks, the weekly podcast for women in leadership, brought to you by Nations of Women. All that remains is for me to say have a fantastic week, stay safe, and reach out if you need any help now at nationsofwomen.com. Until next time, enjoy the pursuit of your potential, and remember, now is your time.